Well, to Cuba now, where thousands of people have gathered to bid their final farewell to their leader, their late leader, Fidel Castro. His remains reached the city of Santiago de Cuba late on Saturday. In an emotional speech in the city's Revolution Square, President Raúl Castro said Cuba's socialist revolution will survive the death of its leader. Eddie Stianchan has more.
Fidel Castro's remains returned to Santiago, where the Cuban Revolution started. Almost 60 years ago, Castro left this city for Havana to take control of the country.
The strength of the revolution can be seen. The stability, the unshakable backing of the people, the straight and just course, the unwavering policy that always looks for justice.
The economy did the opposite and stagnated. Dissent was quashed and thousands fled to the United States. Washington, alarmed at a communist state so nearby, imposed an embargo. So Cuba made allies with the Soviet Union and caused a crisis by hosting its missiles. When the USSR collapsed, Cuba fell into poverty, which still exists even today. Despite the lack of money, healthcare doesn't cost a penny.
Fidel has brought us a healthcare system that covers the entire population, including the most needy, the elderly, and the disabled, without any cost. This has been one of the best outcomes of the revolution.
And a free education system means that literacy rates here are among the best in the world.
When Fidel arrived with the revolution and passed through this very avenue, he brought us freedom. And thanks to Fidel, we now have the houses that we have previously lost.
It does cost to use the censored internet, though. In-home connections are rare, so most people pay $2 an hour for slow Wi-Fi in public parks. And while Cuba is less developed, people still think Castro did the right thing. Many Cubans that I've spoken to express deep gratitude for the social reforms that Fidel Castro implemented in this country, including the free education system, healthcare, subsidies on goods, among many others. And it is for this reason that many of them now see it as their national duty to come out and pay their respects to the leader whom they call the greatest revolutionary. It's too emotional for some, as they say goodbye to the man also known as El Comandante.
As a widowed mother, I never had to pay for my children's education or become dependent on anyone else. The state is fully involved in making a future for our young generations.
Most Cubans haven't had a chance to travel outside of the country. Fidel Castro's system is the only one they know, and despite its flaws, it appears to be admired.
Well, Eddie's is in Santiago de Cuba, and he joins us now live. Eddie's, it's still rather early where you are, but set the scene for us now. How many people have gathered, and what are their expectations for this day?
Well, Andrea, as you said, it's still too early in the morning, 7 a.m., but people have been around in this plaza earlier, but also on the streets around the city since yesterday. I remember there was an overnight vigil that is now over, but still hundreds of people waiting guard by the cortege of Fidel Castro immediately adjacent to this plaza. And just moments ago, roughly 10 minutes ago, the procession took off, and this is why it's empty here right now. But as I've said, hundreds of people are still out there on the streets following the cortege. And today, this morning, as you know, this is the last day of the 9-day mourning period. It is the actual funeral day. So the whole procession is moving forward, a lot more solemn than compared to the previous days, really, because in the past we've seen also people cheering, almost celebrating Fidel Castro's life, chanting, "I am Fidel, long live Fidel." But today, it's a lot more quiet. Also because it's still too early morning, but also there is the realization that today is the final farewell. And that's why once this procession moves forward quite slowly for another 3 kilometers, it will reach the area of the actual burial site where the ashes of Fidel Castro will be entered into a mausoleum. And we know that that part of the procession will be quite discreet. Most of it will be close to the media, as there will be mostly friends, including some celebrities, duties, and also high dignitaries. There will be presidents of Bolivia, Nicaragua, and Venezuela. These are considered the closest allies of Cuba today. There's also ex-presidents of Brazil, both Dilma Rousseff and Lula da Silva. But apart from that, it's ironic that many of the Western countries, or those previous allies like Russia, haven't sent high-level dignitaries.
Okay, Edis, as you say, this is the final farewell for Castro. I still imagine that Cuba will be planning more national tributes and memorials going forward, not just in the near future, but in the years to come.
Well, I think we've heard an important message from Raúl Castro himself, the current president who's taken it over from his brother Fidel Castro. In his powerful speech yesterday, he said that in Cuba from now on there would be no more streets named Castro. There'd be no more monuments erected in his name. And he said that's because Fidel Castro didn't like manifestations of cult of personality. So essentially, we could consider this as a final tribute. In the future, yes, his legacy will live on, because as you can see, these people absolutely adore him. They consider today the most painful day in history of Cuba, and that they will remember him forever because they've taken it as a national duty to continue on with his revolution.
Okay, Edis Yanchan joining us there from Santiago de Cuba. Thanks so much for that.